So today we are going to recap. It's been a few years since we've talked to Lea Michele, and I'm so excited to talk to her. She's pregnant with her second baby, a little girl. Last time we talked, we were in the middle of the pandemic. She was a first-time mom after having her son ever, and now we get to reconnect and talk about second pregnancies, getting pregnant, balancing motherhood with being a working mom, moving back to New York City, all the things. So we'll jump right in with Lea Michele. I feel like the last time that we talked, life was so
So
insanely different.
I know. I think I was living in like my parents' house. It was like still sort of pandemic times. I was
Totally.
in this really interesting time of being a new parent, and I had just come back to the East Coast. It was like this mix of being really exciting and special time, but also like really scary. And now I'm literally in a completely different landscape. So it's really wild. What a difference! I guess it was what, 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago, and I
Yeah.
guys, I remember we were talking because your mom had moved in with you, right? Like, she was helping you
Oh
with
yeah.
your son.
Yes, my mother had gotten stuck with us during the pandemic. She had flown out to LA to just like kind of help me with my pregnancy in February of 2020 and was planning to fly back like 3 weeks later, and then
Oh,
ended up staying with me and my husband in California the whole, my basically my whole pregnancy. And then we
yeah.
had our son, and then we managed to make our way back to the East Coast, which was where we then decided we wanted to live. So it's been a lot of changes.
I mean, so many changes, and I remember when we were talking, we were like, also, I feel like we both had like new mom brains
Yeah.
at like different stages, and also new mom brains in the beginning of or middle of a pandemic, which was like
Hmm.
unheard of, and also not what either of us thought our introductions into motherhood would be like.
Yeah.
But now you're pregnant in a totally different time, and I feel like it's, like, different. Like, even my second pregnancy was a different time, and I feel like there were pros and cons to being pregnant in both times. Like, there was no
Right.
pressure the first time. Like, you didn't have to get dressed. You didn't have
I
to, like,
know.
be around people or do anything. So it's,
This,
like, a very different vibe for you.
I mean, that's like the literally the understatement of it. It's been so different. I mean, first of all, I think just having your second and managing a pregnancy around also taking care of another child, that in and of
So different.
itself is just such a different ball game. And I find that I'm not as present, or like I'm not as focused on this pregnancy as I was with the last. And of course, the last one was during a pandemic where all I was doing was sitting at home being like, are you in there? Now I'll go through
Yeah.
half of my day and it's, making lunch and dropping off at school and going to activities. And then I stop and I'm like, whoa, I'm pregnant. Okay. Have I taken care of myself? Have I eaten? So that, just that alone is different. And then I think the second biggest thing is navigating through a city, which is also really different than navigating through, I lived in California for 13 years. I'm back in New York after, I mean, I left here in 2008 and I didn't come back until 2021 or end of 2020. So I'm getting used to living in the city again, and the elements and people being like, "Oh, you're pregnant," on the street, whereas before I didn't see one person, I didn't see a
I know.
friend, I didn't see family. Um and yeah, and now I'm getting to be out and about and doing things because we're not all stuck at home. And so I have been doing events, I've been working, I've been singing during this pregnancy. So it is just, and I feel completely different. like
Oh, do you feel
I
better this pregnancy or different?
so I felt okay. So with my son, I didn't really have morning, like no morning sickness. The beginning stage was quite mild, and then
Mhm.
as the pregnancy progressed, it got more just challenging, and we had a lot of complications with that pregnancy also.
Right.
With this one, the beginning was so awful, I was like, "Oh my
Girls.
god, this is what."
Yeah.
Yes, is it it's like it's girls, I think. But I was like, "Oh my god." I'm like, it's like what you see in a movie where people
Oh,
where
yeah.
women are like throwing up every left and right, and I'm like, "No, this is it's actually happening."
Yeah.
But now that that's passed, I'm feeling a lot better weirdly in this like, second to latter half. So it's just completely, I feel like I look different too. I feel so much bigger this time around. Everybody's like, "Are you due like tomorrow?" I'm like, "No."
You're also
So
petite, so it's like I always think about that because 'cause I'm taller, and if you're petite and you're pregnant, I feel like it's like a totally different toll that it takes on your body because it's like there's only so much room
I
to
said,
grow.
I know, I said to my husband last night, I was like, I heard a rib crack. Like, I was like, I think I can physically feel my hips. Like, I was like, I'm Googling, like, can you physically feel your hips opening up? Because I think I
Yeah.
am, but it's wild. I'm really just so grateful. I'm so thankful that I get to have this experience. Um, first of all, being closer to my family now with this pregnancy
The best.
and getting to see friends and getting to really just enjoy what it means to be pregnant, and as annoying as it is to get dressed and buy clothes, but I also really sort of love it. And I'm very grateful that I've got to have that quiet, sort of more internal pregnancy before, and now
Mm,
this one is different. But there were also pros. I mean, getting to have a postpartum, especially in such a quiet and peaceful space, was really wonderful. I think that that will be a little jarring for me now that it's just, life is life again, and I have another baby. I think that that's going to be the most different, and potentially a little like, whoa. So I'm sort of preparing myself for that experience to be a whole different, you know what I
yeah.
mean?
So I came last year to New York for work, and I brought both of my girls, my mom, my sister, and my girls were at the time 2.5 and I think 8 months old.
Hmm.
And I literally left there and I was like, I have a whole newfound respect for mothers or just parents in general with young children in the city. I do not
Yeah.
understand how you do it. Like it must just be part of your makeup since
Yeah,
you're from there.
from
But
here.
I was so overwhelmed by like the carrying everything, going in the with the stroller and like all of the coats and the jacket. I was just like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was wild for me. So props to you because I was like a whole other level
It's
of
it's really, yeah, I mean, I think that because I'm from here and, like, I know how to navigate around the city, there is a
yeah,
part of it that's definitely just ingrained in me. I mean, I miss California a lot. I think that you and I actually lived near each other at one point, so I know the idyllic nature of what I mean, California has its, but there are some parts that are just so
I
special, and
know.
there are
Yeah.
days when I'm just like, "Oh, I really wish I could open up the backyard and just have my son run around in the backyard."
Mhm.
But there's also just something I think for me, like we took him to see his first Broadway show a couple of months ago.
Aw,
And I
yeah.
was like, I'm so happy that he gets to have this experience of growing up in this city and having these experience of these things that I did when I was a kid as well.
Yeah.
But there is nothing like trudging through the snow with your stroller or the rain. But I have to say, I we took him to LA a couple of like months ago, not too long ago, and I actually found getting in and out of the car or anything that we had to do, I was like, "Oh, we got to get back." He was like, "Why are we getting in the Mommy, we're getting in the car again?" I was like, "I know. This is so I think that we also can just get in our car, or get in our, walk outside and do
Yeah.
something, which is also a good, a
No,
good pro.
there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah,
I think there's nothing that is more special than being able to raise your kids and have the same experiences with your
experience.
kids that you remember having when you were little or your
Yeah.
parents remember doing with you. Like that is I mean, it's like a totally different level of like beautiful
Yeah,
memories and like doing things all over again. So I totally understand moving back, especially being around your family. Like I rely
family.
on my family so much for help with
Yeah.
my kids. Like we've come out of a whole season of them being sick that I've called my sister, my mom. Like it's,
Oh,
you know, the illnesses with these toddlers is just
yeah.
like gonna send me into a whole different
I
level of a
know.
spiral.
I mean, I just, I was doing a Broadway show for a whole year, and if you're sick, then you are not at your show, and the people are
Right.
coming and they're paying money to come and see you. And so it's a lot of pressure to make sure that you're well every single day. I mean, I was singing 15 solos every night and thirty songs on a two-show day. And my son would come home and I'd hear a cough and I'd hear the wet in his cough and I'd go, okay, here we go. If it's
Ugh.
everything from hand, foot, and mouth to pink eye to
Oh
croup.
my gosh.
I mean, he had almost every single illness, and he was unfortunately also we had a really bad scare last year, and our son was in the hospital for a little while, and so again, trying to navigate the illnesses and then having a job in which you basically can't yourself get sick.
Right.
It's the pressure's intense.
Let's talk about that because like the last
Yeah.
time that we talked, we were both homebound. Also,
Mhm.
you're at home with your child, you're now pregnant, but you moved back into the city and then, you're balancing being in a new environment, moving, having a child, being a mom and,
Yep.
wanting to give your son the attention that you've given him so far and then also you decide to jump back into work full on, like, not like a little bit, but like
No,
full on
like
the whole
full
thing.
on.
Yeah. Was
Yeah.
that like a what was that like? Because I'm sure that was really challenging.
Oh my God, it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. It was also the best thing I've ever done. It was everything all at once. As a family, just doing a whole move to a whole new city and finding our place here, finding out who am I just as a person in this city again? Who am I as a mother here? Who are me and my husband in this new place? Building a community, and then also, like you said, during the pandemic, I was with my son one on one every single day.
Mhm.
And now it's mommy starting to do things and people are going out and about again. So it's so many massive, massive adjustments. And then this huge opportunity came my way, and it was something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. And I knew that it would happen. If it was going to happen, it would happen when it was supposed to for me. Um, Funny enough, we'd been trying to have our second, and we were very unsuccessful. And I just kept wondering, why is this not happening? Why is this not happening? And then this job came around, and I often wonder what if it was, like sort of a sliding doors moment of life. But here I was presented, like I said, with this great opportunity, and I took it. And I think we prepared as much as we could, but at the end of the day, there's just so much that you can do to prepare yourself for what inevitably ended up becoming, for me personally, one of the greatest things I've ever done in my career, and also, just personally, aside from being a mother. And it was very hard. I mean, it was incredibly challenging, not getting to put him to bed at night, having to leave, not being able to get sick. Life goes on, like life doesn't stop.
Yeah.
And but I needed to be in this place every day, and I needed to give my attention and all of my energy to playing this character, just as much as I was giving to everything at home. So it was so, so hard, but I'm very proud of myself. I'm proud of like my family, and I'm grateful for them for like lifting me up. I had an opportunity for my son to come and see the show,
Aw.
and so it was really beautiful, but it was so incredibly hard.
Did you feel, I always think about this because I look back at like my mom with the four of us kids and she was working full time while we were all growing up and I feel like there, I of course don't remember when she didn't put me to sleep when I was like, a
Yeah,
toddler, of course. But you think as a parent when your kids are toddlers, like, oh my gosh, I'm not putting them to sleep or I'm missing
right.
these moments. And, as moms, especially, we have this mom guilt that everybody talks about and,
Mhm.
that we put so much pressure on ourselves to be there for every single moment. And then you jump into this big part of this huge opportunity that comes your way and you're balancing motherhood and it's like you're in this tug for the first time. Was that like a big thing that weighed on you while you were, showing up and putting on a
Oh,
big
yeah.
smile every single night?
It weighed on me so much. I mean, I think that the hardest part was, like, if I would take him to the park and all I wanted to do was just, like, run and, like, scream with him and, like, just but I'm thinking to myself, "I have to protect my voice. I can't be running around. I can't exert my energy. I have to be tap dancing at 10:45 PM tonight while the rest of the world
Mhm.
is, getting ready to go to bed." And so I felt so guilty that I couldn't be as 100% in those moments as I wanted to because it was always like I felt like I needed to be dividing my energy. But what I did do was I tried to be so present and I tried to figure out what can I do and what can I do that means a lot to me and to him. And so what are those things? And so I'm a morning person despite getting home at midnight from a Broadway show. Like I will wake up early in the morning. I think it's the years of doing television and having like early calls. It's just also the kind of person that I am. So no matter what, like every morning I would wake up and I would take him to school every morning. And even if I had two shows that day, I would do my
Wow.
best to take him to school. And that's what that worked for me. And it was our special time together. Or if it was a day off, I made sure that like my day off is just staying home with him and doing nothing to nothing or everything together. So I just tried to figure out like how, rather than being mad at myself that all of the normal things weren't the exact same, it's like, okay, well, what are the new things now that kind of work for what I need, but also, fill up both of our buckets. Um, but it was also sort of just like jumping out of a plane.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that we have such a, like, an understanding, cool kid. Like he's just really great. And I think I think maybe in the course of the year, he like cried when I left like twice, which I'm so thankful
Wow.
for.
Yeah.
But I think he feels really so like grounded and stable in his life with, my parents come by all the time. They come by like once or twice a week. My husband is always present, when he's not working. It's like we're always together for dinners. So I think, we did our best to not make his life and his routine change so much. And I think he adapted really, really well to it all. And luckily, it was at an age where he just started to like understand, well, mommy's going here and mommy's going to work. And just the other day, I had to go and sing in DC. And he said to my husband, he goes, mommy's going to sing at an event or at a show. He said, mommy's going to go sing at a show, but it's not the funny girl show. And it's just so wild to me that I've told this story a lot, but to me, I think it's like the best because he sat through all of Funny Girl at 2.5,
Wow.
which is crazy. I mean, some adults will tell you that that second act can get a little long and a little slow and a little sad.
That's
And
wild.
he came back a few weeks later just to pick me up from work, and he goes, "Daddy, we're just going for the end, right? Because that show is really long."
Oh my
And so
gosh. I mean, nothing like the brutal honesty of a toddler.
exactly, exactly. But
That
I
is
mean, I've never, if you were in the audience the day that my son was there also, I will say that, I mean, I was just beaming. Like I was
oh, I'm
beaming.
sure.
It
Yeah.
was there was, oh my gosh, there was nothing like it. And to have the support of my cast, like that was also, so helpful that everyone there understood that sometimes I just had days where it was like, I'd walk off stage for one scene and I just would crumble because I just missed my baby and.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when your son was sick and you missed
Yeah.
a show, and I remember hearing about that, and I was like, "That's motherhood." Like, that
Oh my
is
God.
it's like it's terrifying, it's so scary, and it's also like that's your priority now, which is so
Yeah.
different than your whole life and your whole career before that for you specifically is like you show up no matter what and you do an incredible job and like but it's a different level of like this is my priority now, and no
Mm-hmm.
matter how much you beat yourself up, it's like people need to understand, being a mom is like number one and everything else falls after that.
Yeah,
So it's nice to hear that you had people around you who you felt were supportive
definitely.
because it's an
Yeah,
adjustment.
absolutely. And I think it's hard. I don't think that, look, anybody, when you go see a movie or a play or a musical and you're in the audience, you're just watching what you're seeing, you're watching the show, you're watching the characters, you're not thinking of what is that person's, what's happening in their
Yeah,
life. And like I said before, life goes on, like life continues. But I could sort of power through anything that I was personally going through to make sure that I was there. But when it came to, our son, um, it wasn't even a question.
yeah,
I there that wasn't even a question of, that I had to be there. And it was awful and it was so scary. And thankfully it's all, resolved and everything is okay. But, in those moments, it's like literally nothing else matters. And to have to see, and what we dealt with, although he was only in the hospital for a couple of days, he needed to have, be monitored and have treatment at the hospital for, I think, about 6 months after. So I was also going to, the hospitals here in New York, once or twice a week,
oh
getting
my
him
god,
checked out, doing blood work, doing everything, and then going to work. And, there's also just that comes with its own set of nerves and anxieties and stress. And so, like I said, I'm so grateful for the people that I had around me and really proud of myself and my husband. We've really navigated through a lot together and,
yeah,
so unbelievably
that's
grateful.
I mean, it's crazy when you think about that. If you like, you think about people, especially people like yourself, and you're like, oh, everything is great. They're
Yeah.
coming here. It's like, and then you really think about what people are dealing with behind closed doors or what people go home
Yeah.
to. And it puts everything into perspective because, so often people think, oh, if you're a known person, you don't have, you know, real life things going on. You don't
Yeah.
have, challenges or setbacks. And I think it puts so much into perspective, and doing it in the light of motherhood and working
Hmm.
for the first time is, um, I mean, incredibly challenging. So,
Yeah. It's
I think,
also like, I think, I've said this before too, that I think a mistake I made in my first pregnancy was I was so, I think I was more so paralyzed by a lot of the fears and anxiety. Like, I suffer from anxiety, and it really got exacerbated during my first pregnancy, um, because I had a lot of complications, and I was so scared. I was like paralyzed by this fear. And it was the pandemic, and I was in and out of the hospital having all of these tests done, and I didn't tell anybody in my life what I was going through. And I really regret that, because I think that everybody around me just figured everything was fine. And it sort of just did me a disservice because I couldn't have that support. And what I've, tried to do just in my life and, in being a mother and in this second pregnancy is just not feel free to be a little bit more open with the ups and the downs, and not always have to be so worried about either inconveniencing people or worrying other people, because really the support is what you need at the end of the day more than anything.
it's a fine line. It's like you want people to, you want to tell people what you're going through,
Yeah.
and so they understand, what's going on or why you might feel or have a certain vibe or, not be able to show up to something. And then it's also like you want to be able to be private about things, which is why I always think first trimesters of pregnancy are such interesting time, because especially if you don't feel well, you want to be able to say
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel terrible
Yeah.
because I'm pregnant, but then it's like,
Right.
don't say anything to anybody because it's too early to tell that you're pregnant. And I remember you talking about in our last conversation, the anxiety that you experienced when you announced your pregnancy,
Mm.
your first pregnancy, and just being like, I don't know what's going to happen with this pregnancy. We're doing so many tests, and that
Mm-hmm.
level of stress and anxiety. And, you mentioned trying to get pregnant with your
Yep.
second and it not happening or it being, harder than you imagine. Were these two experiences of getting pregnant so dramatically different, or were there
Yeah.
similarities? Was it more challenging than you thought?
No, everything has just been completely different. um, I think that the journey of getting pregnant and everyone's journeys and how unbelievably different things can be from one pregnancy to the next is it's just unbelievable to me. Prior to getting pregnant with Ever, I had been diagnosed with PCOS,
Mhm.
quite close to when I had ended up getting pregnant. I think all the time, if I had been diagnosed earlier, um, gosh, the time it would have saved me and the stress. But they say PCOS is challenging to diagnose. Luckily, I was able to figure that out. And once I was, it was it was easier for me to get pregnant naturally with our son. I was put on a good medication that helped me. I did have a procedure to remove some, cysts and polyps. And once that was resolved, I was able to get pregnant. And now that I had my PCOS under control, I was really hopeful that getting pregnant a second time would be easy for me.
Yeah.
And so we decided to start trying about a year or so once we were settled into the city, a year or so later, and it turned out to be completely not what we expected. We had two back to back very early failed pregnancies, and I was just so shocked. I'd never had a miscarriage before, and I was like, oh wow, okay. I wonder, like, why is this happening?
Mhm.
And I think but when I the first one, I was like, oh, that was weird. And then when it happened again right away, I was like, oh, wait a second. Like,
Mhm.
what is something is like wrong. And then that's when, work started happening, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to just step away from this for a second. Maybe this isn't the right time. And it wasn't until a little bit later, and I had another, and I was actually working during the time, which was super
Oh
challenging to
my
be,
gosh.
working and having to really, stand and give your everything to so many people and process what we were experiencing at the same time, which was very painful.
Mhm.
Um, that's when I said, okay, like, we need to dive into deeper into what's happening. And I came to find out that I had endometriosis,
Mm.
which I had no idea. If you would have, like, I would have never have guessed that I had endometriosis from what I hear the symptoms are. I was having, painful periods, but nothing too bad. But I was having a ton of stomach issues, and I would have like one day of like extreme pain, but then I'd be fine. And I was like, well, that must not be that bad. And I was like, I just must be stressed from working. And I remember someone I was working with, during Funny Girl saying to me, like, I don't think this is just from doing the show. But I was in this mode of being like, I have to show up for everyone. I cannot focus on this right now. And it turns out I was battling a really bad case of endometriosis, while I was needing to perform and dance and be on the stage every
Wow.
night. And I had no idea. So I ended up having to have a surgery for that and really go down the road of a lot of, just like research and everything to figure out, what does this now mean? And it did take us down the road of fertility, which I'm so grateful for. We had the most amazing doctors here in New York and a wonderful team of people who helped us. And um, fertility is very hard. It's in its own right. It's very challenging. I was put on so many, drugs and medications and 1,000 shots. And you see women posting videos of hundreds of needles, and it's really intense. Luckily, we were able to get pregnant, but even still, like, once I got pregnant, just all of the fears and all of the, from everything I dealt with in our first pregnancy, and from all of these, the confusion around losses, and
Yeah.
everything just was so heavy on, weighing on me. But I got to a point with this pregnancy where I said to myself that I just feel that this pregnancy deserves to be honored and celebrated. And I can't control anything that's going to happen. It's all in God's hands. And all I know is that I just want to try to step out of the fear for a moment and honor this beautiful gift. And that's just what I chose to do. And it doesn't mean that I'm still not really scared, but I'm trying to lean into more of, just how grateful I know that this is such a challenging process for so many women. And the fact that we're here right now, like, just trying to be so grateful for that, because it really was, a journey, and we're here, and I'm so thankful.
I mean, it's such a beautiful choice to get into that mode of being in a place where you're, aware of the anxieties and the stress, and also, what comes with pregnancy after loss, like the fear of what's going to happen, when is it going to happen, not being present in your pregnancy. Even if the doctors say everything looks good, everything is
Mm-hmm.
fine, you still have that anxiety. You have talked openly about dealing with anxiety, but I mean, it seems like you have a hold on it in this pregnancy where it's not as big of a part of this pregnancy as it was your first round.
Yeah, I think that, I think that just as a person, like I've said, like I certainly struggle with anxiety just on its own. And then I think when you couple that with being pregnant and pregnancy hormones, and then PTSD and all of
Yeah.
that, combined. So it's really a challenge. And I just try to give myself a lot of grace, and I just try to do, anything that I can do to kind of, take care of myself and make my sort of body as good as I can for this baby. And, but it's certainly hard.
How do you do that though? Like, I think people, people relate to this anxiety and this stress of
Yeah.
being pregnant and wondering, like, is everything okay? Is it,
Yeah.
I'm nervous, what's going to happen? And, you also have so much going on. You also have a
Hmm.
toddler now that you're running after, you're living in a new environment. So it would make sense to be anxious and
Yeah.
also to, be worried, but also you've made such a huge effort to celebrate this pregnancy and be present in this pregnancy. And you're having a daughter, which is so
Yeah.
fun. And it's like, it's such a beautiful time in your life, but also life happens and,
Hmm.
hormones, everything happens. Is there something that you do when feel like you're getting to that place that helps you stay in a present, calm space?
I think that what I tried to do, even before getting pregnant, I worked really hard on just creating um, these really good just staples in my life, um, that made me feel good. I really stopped drinking a lot in the fall. I was like, this just isn't serving me, and it's actually exacerbating my anxiety. And 'cause waking up in the morning and having like 3 cups of coffee, I was like, this is also not serving me. And why am I not spending more time meditating and doing the things that really, I have something that is challenging for me every day. And so why am I doing these things that just for me personally are making it worse? So really just implementing those things into my life even before getting pregnant have helped me so much during this pregnancy, because now I have these really great rituals already in place. It's not like I'm now quickly having to catch up because now I'm pregnant. My mother worked in women's health for 25 years.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing better than being able to be with a doctor, especially at this time in your life where
Hmm.
pregnancy is like, it can be anxiety causing. You can wonder what's that, even though you've been pregnant before. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it's like
It
people think, oh, you've done this before,
No,
I'm like, no, no, no.
no,
This is
no.
very
And it's
different.
also like, my son is going to be 4. So,
Yeah.
I literally feel like I'm calling my friends. I'm like, I called one of my girlfriends. She just had her 4th baby. And I was like, how do you breastfeed again?
Yeah.
Like, how do you, meanwhile, I breastfed for a year. I was
Yeah.
like, what do we do again? Like, how
I
does it
know.
work? Like, literally,
It's so
it's
wild.
wild. It's
Yeah.
wild. It's why
It
it's, I think you're supposed to forget, like,
totally. So you
so
do it
that then
again.
you do it again. Yeah. Like,
Yeah. It's 100%.
it's
I feel like
crazy.
you're biologically made to like even forget the labor, forget the delivery, like
All of
forget the
it.
whole the even like the morning sickness. Like I had morning sickness with both of my girls and I was just like let's do it
I've
again. Like
I've already forgotten, and mine was
yeah,
only just a couple of like
I
weeks
know.
ago, and I've already been like, "What? I was sick? Like that's not like that wasn't that
Yeah.
bad." Meanwhile, I looked like the Gollum from Lord of the Rings, like literally like keeled over,
I know.
not being able to eat anything, and now
Yeah.
I'm like, "Great! Like
I
that
know.
wasn't so bad." It's wild.
It's
It's
yeah, it's
so
really but I'll tell you who remembers are the husbands and the partners. They remember. They'll remind you
oh
like very easy to be like, "No, no,
yes.
no.
No, yeah,
That was
I know
bad."
he it's that is so true because I say all the time with my first pregnancy, I was like, "I love being pregnant. Being pregnant was amazing." He was like, "You were like literally like waking up in the middle of the night like in a ball, like hysterically crying, like." And I was like, "Really? I was?" Like I
Like, I
yeah,
don't know.
it's I do know like for me though, I had a very I had a beautiful postpartum. Like I had the most incredible postpartum. The first like 6 months of just having a really beautiful and easy experience with breastfeeding. He was a generally a very good sleeper, and I just had this. We had this quiet, bonding, beautiful time. Myself, my husband, also my mom, in
Love it.
California. And then I had a definitely a delayed postpartum. I would say more anxiety and a little depression, closer to about 7 months, because
Oh,
around
interesting.
then for me, like that's when I felt like my hormones changed. We moved, and I felt so. I really felt so alone. Like I remember having days during that time of just sitting at home all day with our son. My husband was working, and I would just be like, what do we do now? Like, how do I fill this day? And we were, there was no one really around. We couldn't go and do stuff. And that was really an interesting experience because it wasn't the typical right away, postpartum depression. It was
Mhm.
definitely like delayed. Um, and so I'm, again, I can't make any assumptions as to what this process will be like, but I am sort of preparing myself and just, you know, I know that it's not going to be the same now that we're here, we're around family, and everyone's going to want to come and see the baby. And, I have to also have our 3-year-old coming in and out of our room, and it's just going to be different.
Yeah, that was something that I feel like was a little bit of a silver lining in COVID was that nobody wanted to come over all the time. Like we didn't
Yeah.
have to deal with people, wanting to come over. And of course, there's parts of it that are helpful to have people come over and, help with if you have other kids, help with the kids, help
Yeah.
with if it's laundry or food or washing bottles, whatever it is. But there's also some level of like, you don't even have to think about it
Hmm.
that I found to be really peaceful. And when you're not having like the being in a pandemic, you have to
Yeah.
think about people are going to want to come over. They're going to want to
Yep.
stop by. How do I deal with those boundaries? What are our boundaries? Like, I also have you're going to have a 4-year old there too. Like, how do I keep
Hmm.
his life normal? It's a different set of things to think about. And are you nervous about the postpartum depression or anxiety being a part of it this time?
I think that I do think that a lot of it for me was situational, just the fact that like I was alone, like,
Mhm.
and we were living, in seclusion, and we didn't, no one could really do stuff. So I'm curious to see if, if just being able to have the accessibility to having more movement in our
Mhm.
lives will change that.
Yeah.
But I was really grateful because I didn't really know what was happening at the time, but I felt that it was mild enough that I was able to kind of just, get myself through it. And so I'm not, I feel like, I just feel like giving myself grace with whatever happens, with this. I know that so many women experience postpartum, and I really, hope it's not a part of my journey, but I also know that I did experience it before and I made my way out, and and everything kind of just finds its way. You find your way, to the other side.
Yeah. I mean, the postpartum anxiety thing is a real thing that I feel like people talk so much more openly about now that like we've gone through pandemic and,
Yep.
you've gone through COVID. My postpartum anxiety was like, I mean, just like I
Uh,
was like, if I open a window, I
oh,
literally would have moments where with Lila, my first, I would open a window and I'd think to myself, like, if someone coughs down the street, am
oh yeah,
I like, is that
it's
is she gonna
bad.
get yeah, it was
Yeah.
a whole,
Yeah.
I mean, different level. So it's interesting, as for us first time moms that had
Mm-hmm.
babies in the pandemic, it's
Yep.
interesting to see as you have other experiences. I always said that I was grateful I didn't have a pregnancy before the pandemic because I would have
Mm.
felt like, oh my gosh, what is this that I'm like, this is so different than
Mm-hmm.
a non-pandemic pregnancy. So now I feel like pregnancies after that, you're kind of like have a different level of confidence. And also there are new
Mm-hmm.
things, of course, to get, acquainted with and adjusted
Yeah.
to. But yeah, it was definitely the biggest adjustment for me with which you have a little bit of a better setup because your son's a little older was just
Mm-hmm.
like the dividing of me
Oh
with
yeah.
that was like that was
That's
literally the only thing that I thought about the whole time.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was just speaking to, I'm friends with Hillary Duff, and she is 4 beautiful children now. She's such an incredible mother. I mean, I don't know how she does it, and she does it, with a smile. And of course, we all, no one, everyone has their lives, when the doors are closed, and it's never as easy as it seems. But I just think that she's such an incredible mother. And I said to her the other day, I was like, tell me everything. Like, remind me, like, what do I need to
Yeah.
know? And she was like, I think the hardest is just that the other kids need you so much. And I felt in that moment, like, very grateful, that he is a little older and that he's
Yeah.
sort of in his own little lane. But again, it reminds me a little bit of when I was working, and it's like, okay, I adjusted and I found the things that we could do together that worked for the two of us. So it's like, okay, what can I do with him, knowing that, I'm recovering from labor, or potentially, a C-section. What can we do together that, is it watching a movie together, or is it baking? Like, we did a ton of baking together when I was working, because for me that was like so easy for me to like cook dinner or bake, and he loved it, and it wasn't like I was exerting a ton of energy. So it's like, okay, how can we find those things again? I'm not working, but I'll be recovering, and we'll have the other
Yeah.
baby. So maybe I'll take a little bit from what I learned from that experience and apply it to this.
Yeah. I mean, it all falls into place. And also, we're so hard on ourselves that they're gonna remember, not skipping a bedtime or someone else it's like a whole thing. And I think, I mean, it also sounds like you have such a great husband and support system there that it's that was like when everyone always said like, what was it like to jump to 1 to 2? I was like, that was literally the hardest
Yeah.
factor was just like because it makes you look at your
Navigating.
first postpartum and you're like, that was like a spa retreat.
I know. That's what I'm thinking. I mean, I was literally in LA, doors open to the backyard, the breeze was coming in, the baby was like in the little,
I know.
Moses basket on the floor. My mom was like making a green juice, and now it's like, oh my God, it's, my son had pink eye 2 days ago, and I was like emailing my OB, like, what if I get pink eye? And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
what if there's a newborn and there's pink eye in the house? It's like, it's just, but I grew up, in New York. I grew up, in the city in the Bronx, and I have a very big, my father's family is, big Jewish family on my dad's side, a big Italian family on my mom's side, and I grew up with my aunts and my grandmother and like all of my family around, and a really incredible, village and community. And my parents especially are so close with my son, and come, once a week and spend their little time with him. And, same with my in-laws, they're not too far, and making sure that, family is nearby. So hopefully we'll be able to use everyone how we need, and then also say like doors are closed when we
Yeah.
need to say doors are closed.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. Having family nearby is
Yeah.
just, I mean, it's a total game changer, postpartum or not. It's just like having
Yeah.
that, it's different having family nearby versus friends. And
Oh
of
yeah.
course, yeah, it's
I
like,
never I never thought I would leave LA. I mean, I was such a convert. Like I completely fell in love with it after doing Glee. Like I was like, this is it. And I met my husband, he's actually from the East Coast, and we met, through friends. And I was like, well, if you want to marry me, like you have to live in California. This is where you have to do. And he did. He moved to California. He moved his business to California.
wow.
And then mid-pandemic, pregnant, like due any day, just like so emotional, just like crying all the time. And I just turned to him and I was like, I want to go home.
Yeah.
And he was like, what? Are you
Yeah.
serious? And we literally, our house sold 1 hour after I gave birth. And the realtor was like, do you want to buy another house in California? Like, we have these ones on the market that you love. Should we put out an offer? And we were like, no. And we just sold our house. We put everything in storage, and we came with just a few bags to New York a few weeks later. So
Wow.
I
That
know.
is, I mean, that's a stressful, you're going to have a great postpartum this time then,
I
because that is
maybe
like,
I
I
know, but
mean, moving.
the
Whoa.
nesting for me right now is that's the craziest. I think I could get anything done for any, like I am like an organization machine right now. I have,
Oh my
it's
gosh.
so amped up. It's so like unbelievable. It's also like beyond stereotypical, of what you would think. And I mean, I'm down to organizing like the cotton balls in my, cabinet. Like
Same.
it's
And then you think
crazy.
about the fact that like you're doing that on pregnant energy while your body's also like growing a
Making,
baby. And you're like,
I know,
how do you, how did I do that? But you just had, like, I remember doing that when I was pregnant and it was just like, I had this endless energy, but only
energy.
to organize.
Only, but don't make me like walk down the street.
No.
Like if I have
Uh-uh.
to like walk, like I'm like, oh my God, I'm walking, got my hand on my back, but I'm in the house and I'm like climbing up and pulling things from here and
Mhm.
there. But I also know that like I'm in a little bit of a sweet spot. This is, a very similar time that I was pregnant with our son. So I'm used to being pregnant during like the hot heat of the summer. And I know what that feels like with like a 9 month pregnant belly. So I'm
Oh my gosh.
also just like taking advantage of this time right now and trying to get as much stuff done as I can now
Mhm.
before, I feel like
The
I
heat comes.
really can't do anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it sounds like I'm so happy for you. It sounds like you have such a great setup where you are now, and that you're, really just going to be able to be in this pregnancy, be so present. It's a totally different time, and also have a great postpartum, and having the age gap that you have is going to be, I think, so great because you
Yeah.
also have like mommy's little helper. And
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
yeah, I'm 4 years apart from my sister, and I are really close in age, and then my
Uh-huh.
brother and I are 4 years apart, and my other brother and I are 8 years apart, so I
Uh-huh.
remember them coming home and being born, my 2 brothers, and it's just like,
Oh,
it's the best. I
I
mean,
that I'm the most excited about that.
yeah.
And it was really great because when we told him, like he was so like he understood. He was so excited. Like I could
Aw.
tell. I was like, is he getting emotional? Like, and he's very sweet, and he's like, this is my baby. Like, making sure that I'm taking care of his baby for him,
Aw.
and it's really sweet. Look, I'm an only child, and I love, being an only child. I have a great relationship with my parents and a great bond with my parents. But it's really interesting that, as you get older and you see your parents lose their parents, and or and how they, if they have siblings, can lean on their siblings, and
Right.
what that is like, even if they're not the closest. It's like this incredible coming together. And I watched it both with my mother and my father. And it was only in that moment that I realized what my experience will be like as an only child. And although I have, a husband and a family, it will just be very different for me.
Mhm.
And so I've always felt that it's important to give him a sibling. Um, you know, but if that wasn't going to happen, then I also know how great it is to have this fabulous bond with your parents of just
Yeah.
being an only child. But it's been very interesting for me to sort of process, what it really means to be an only child
Yeah.
as your parents get older and as you get older.
Yeah, it's also, I'm sure, a lot of pressure to put on you as being the sole person to, like I think of me and
Yeah.
my 3 younger siblings, and it's like everybody has like a different role with each of my parents. So I
Yeah.
feel like being an only child, it's like you assume all of those roles. Plus
All
you
of it.
also have your own children and your own family.
Yep.
So it's a lot.
It's definitely, yes, that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
That's a whole other conversation that we
that's
can
a
have
whole
another
other
time.
podcast.
It's true, it really is.
But
Well, thank you
yeah.
so much for taking
Oh,
time to
thank
do this.
you.
I know you're so busy, but you're glowing, you look
Thank
amazing, and
you.
I'm so happy for you. I was like, when
Thank you.
I heard that you were pregnant, I was just like, this is so exciting. And it seems like it's a totally different time, right? It's
Yeah.
just like you can't even, you look back, like I look back on when we had our first children and even my second, and I'm just like, it's like a
It's
different
such a
world that we live in.
That's just life though. That's the crazy thing. I mean, I really never expected to be back here in New York. I never expected to be working back on Broadway again. I think that when you are in the hell of infertility and trying to get pregnant, it seems like you will never get pregnant. And so to be where we are right now, like I could not be more grateful. It all still hasn't like set in. I still can't believe so much of it. I'm so honestly so grateful. And yeah, like I said before, just trying to embrace the blessings and the gifts of what this time really is. So
I feel like you're exactly, I mean, everybody always says you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And
yeah,
I feel like for you, it's like so clear, especially having a girl. Like it's like
yeah,
all like this is exactly how it's supposed to be for you.
yep,
And it's so exciting and beautiful. And then to be able to have these stories to tell your daughter and
yeah.
also singing in this pregnancy, like it's just,
I know. That's yeah. I mean, singing
wild.
is not that is not easy pregnant.
Well, I'm
That is
sure, like, because of
definitely.
the breath, it's just like
Oh my gosh, it is so, so hard, but it's also been really cool and fun. And
yeah.
I just, yeah, I'm so grateful.
Oh, I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Leah for joining us today. We had such a great conversation about being present in this pregnancy, life since we last talked with her first pregnancy and being postpartum. And I'm just so excited for her. I'm so happy for her at this stage in her life. And I cannot wait to see how she does with baby number 2.